Good evening. The Clover School District Board of Trustees welcomes you to today's monthly business meeting. The CSD Board meets formally twice a month, the second and fourth Monday, one work session and one board meeting. The business meeting format is as follows. The board will follow its approved agenda. During public forum, attendees electing to speak will have 3 minutes. The board chair will address all speakers to provide the rules for public forum. Following the public forum, the meeting will continue with the remaining presentations on the agenda. Following each presentation, the board will have the opportunity to ask questions before moving to the next. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of Allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Please pray with me. God, you are the builder of all things. Please guide us in this meeting. Help us come up with effective strategies that can enable us to move forward as a team in a meaningful way. Help us to generate good plans that are practical, sustainable, and easily implemented. Guide us toward the best way to take action to accomplish our goals. Help us to tackle all the topics we need to discuss, come up with excellent solutions, and leave this meeting inspired. Amen.
Without objection, the board will approve the agenda for tonight's meeting. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Without objection, the board will approve minutes from 11/28 meeting. Hearing none, minutes are approved. Without objection, the board will approve the staff personnel recommendations from executive session. Hearing none, the staff personnel is approved. Dr. Quinn, recognitions.
Okay, I love it when there's a full house. Happy holidays and welcome to all of you who are here in person, and welcome to those individuals who are joining us from our YouTube channel. We have a lot of special people to recognize tonight, so I'm going to get started. The first group, and I'll have you go ahead and come forward, is our Clover High School Special Olympics, or our Special Olympians, I should say. So one of our biggest points of pride in the district are our Special Olympians, and the joy that Clover High School students and staff take in supporting them, as shown by Clover High Schools being named as a banner unified school. At the end of October, our Clover High School Olympians competed in the fall games at Coastal Carolina and did an outstanding job. The unified flag football team won gold as the top team in the state in their division. Brandon Kerr and Patty Myers coach the flag football unified team. Would you please introduce your student athletes in attendance tonight?
We've got Kente brother and cousins. We've got Maddie. We have Eric, Tyler, Carolyn, and Melissa. And our coach.
All right, next, we have the unified volleyball team. They also won the gold and were named the top team in the state in their division. Will Plyler coaches the unified volleyball team and is assisted by Laura Ness and Taylor Stewart. Would you please introduce the members of your team who are here tonight?
So we've got Coach Higbee with us tonight, Coach Plyler. We have Mason, we have Haley, and we have Brady.
All right. Clover High School students also performed at high levels in bocce ball, with the two-man teams earning bronze, silver, and 2 gold medals. Jasmine Davis Kittle and Patrick Hawthorne coached the bocce ball team. Please introduce your members in attendance tonight.
They're not all paired up, but, oh, there, no, okay, but, we have Addie and Abby and Lauren and Frankie and Nolan and Caitlin.
Last lastly, the equestrian team did an amazing job at the South Carolina State Equestrian Competition. Allison Wadecki earned 1 second-place finish and 2 third-place finishes, while Brandon Skiba took home 3 first-place finishes at the event held in Aiken, South Carolina. Haley Nicholson competed in the equestrian competition in Tryon, North Carolina, and she earned 2 second-place awards and 1 fourth-place award. The equestrian team is coached by Miss Wendy Schoenfeld. If you have not stepped forward and you're on the equestrian team, I wasn't sure if you got to step forward. There you go. Let's give all of our Special Olympians one big round of applause. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. You may be seated. I've got a lot to read on this next one, so I'll ask the next group to begin coming forward. This is the Clover High School Pride of Clover Marching Band. I believe we have our seniors in attendance tonight, so if you'll go ahead and come forward while I begin to read. We would like to recognize the Clover High School Marching Band, the Pride of Clover. The Pride of Clover had a tremendous marching season under the direction of band director Mr. Rick Langdell, who is in his first year at Clover High School. The Pride of Clover showed off their immense talent by earning first place at all captions and being named grand champions at the C. Philip McIntyre Tournament of Bands in Duncan, South Carolina. They also added first place honors in all captions and were named grand champions at the Pride of Robinson Invitational in Concord, North Carolina. At the Bands of America East Tennessee Regional Championship, this outstanding group was named the 4A Regional Champions, winning Best Music, Visual, and Overall Effect, and they finished in the top 5 in the overall competition in prelims and in the finals. Finally, they added a second place upper state finish and finished 3rd overall while finishing 4th in the entire state at the South Carolina 5A State Championship held in Irmo, South Carolina, or Irmo High School, South Carolina. Their performance earned an overall mark of 91.85, which ranks as the CHS highest ever score in 5A placement. Joining us tonight is the senior class. Mr. Langdell, please introduce your musicians, if you can do that with all this group. This is not a test.
I'm going to do my best. Thank you so much for being here tonight. We have 32 seniors that are going to be graduating out of the band program this year. Obviously, this is not 32. We can't count. But some of them are at the high school right now recording for the National Trumpet Convention competition. So there's a few seniors with that and a few that couldn't make it tonight. I'm going to do my best as I do this without my scripts. Okay. Over to your left, we're going to do first names. Okay. We have Michael, tenor sax. We have Evan, clarinets. We have Jackie, trumpets. We have Ashley, one of our drum majors, and bass clarinet. We have Angelina, bari sax. We have Colin, baritone and trombone. We have Haley. I teach both her and her sister, so I almost got the wrong one. Color guard. We have Brenna, trombone, baritone. We have Kira, piccolo, flutes. We have, this is getting high stakes. We have Noah, trombone, baritone. We have Isabella, also known as Izzy, color guard. Next to her we have Andrea, color guard. Back behind her we have Jaden, tuba. We'll start here. We have Adriana, color guard. We have Charlotte, clarinet. We have Andrew, euphonium. We have August, color guard. We have Nathan, trombone, baritone. We have Kayla, color guards. We have Mr. Jason, percussion. We have junior drum major. Wow. I'm definitely not Daniela. We have Mr. Amirmani, who's one of our drum majors. We have Miss Ella, who's one of our guard students. And then last but certainly not least, Miss Margaret Gossett, one of our drum majors. We do have 2 other students that are here that are not seniors, but I do want to recognize them. This is being recognized later in the program. we have Miss Appleyard, and Appleyard is one of the artists who's going to be recognized a little bit, and then we have Mr. Brandon Rudy, who's going to be recognized in a bit, different part of the program. So I wanted to give them a shout out too.
And just so you can be a little bit more impressed, how many total band students do you have?
There's 212 and the marching band.
So that's a lot of names to have to know. Congratulations, great
There's a
job.
lot of duplicates. So that's why a lot of Noahs, a lot of duplicate names. So, yeah.
Congratulations, guys. Thank you. I'm going to let this big group make their way before I start with the next group. Sometimes we can get a traffic jam. All right, we're moving next to our Clover High School CTE recognitions. We're going to start out with DECA Regionals. If you will begin to come forward, if you are in the DECA Regionals. We would like to congratulate the CTE students who excelled at the DECA Regionals competition on Thursday, November 17th, on behalf of Clover High School. Brandon Rudy, Noah Falls, Benjamin Cecilia, and Josh Capadia each finished in third place in the following categories: Hotel and Lodging Management Series, Accounting Application Series, Human Resource Management Series, and Sports and Entertainment Marketing Series. Karis Murphy finished second place in the Entrepreneurship Series, and Dustin Sampers earned first place accolades in the Automotive Service Marketing Series. Let's give a big round of applause to these DECA Regional champions. Good job, guys. Thank you. Next up is Clover High School FFA. If you'll begin coming forward. You can always pick them out in a crowd with their jackets on. We would like to congratulate the Clover High School FFA chapter. Recently, the Clover FFA chapter was recognized at the National FFA Convention in Indianapolis, Indiana, for being a 3-star chapter. A 3-star ranking is the highest ranking a chapter can receive from the National Association. Clover FFA chapter is one of South Carolina's top 3. This summer, the Clover chapter received one of 3 governor's citations by the South Carolina FFA Association. Clover FFA received the governor's citation in community development. With this citation, the chapter received a $1,000 check to help with chapter activities. Additionally, 2 Clover FFA alumni received their American FFA degree from the National FFA Association, Michael Moses and Cameron Cogdill. The American degree is awarded to 1% of FFA populations. Our FFA advisors are Cheyenne Hunter and Shaylin Wiebe. I don't believe they could be here tonight, but Logan Boland is the chapter president. Logan, would you please introduce the FFA members in attendance tonight?
So I'm Logan, I'm the president. This is Maddie Johnson, she's the vice president. Madeline Boland, secretary. Matthew Moses, treasurer. Richard Sandstrom, sentinel. Catherine Stewart, reporter. Riley Cotton, historian, and then Trevor Melton, chaplain.
And let's give them a round of applause. This next young lady really stood out for her art ability. Would Emma Appleyard please come forward while we talk a little bit about your accomplishments? We would like to congratulate Emma Appleyard of Clover High School. Emma recently won Best of Show at the York County High School's Art Show at the Center for the Arts in Rock Hill. Emma's work was chosen Best in Show in competition out of 100 pieces of art submitted by 97 students across York County and representing all 4 school districts. Congratulations to Emma Appleyard. And last but not least, we have a very special recognition from some of our 9th grade staff members. If you 3 would come forward if you were able to be here tonight. Our final recognition tonight is for a trio of staff members who were instrumental in responding to a student who experienced a medical emergency on campus earlier this year. Ms. Natasha Duckwall, our school nurse, Mr. Justin Cheek, one of our athletic trainers, and Officer John King stepped up and utilized their training to ensure that the student got the proper care that was needed in a very critical moment. Thank you for your heroic actions and your reaction under pressure. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And this concludes our recognitions for this evening. I want to thank everyone who came for that portion of the meeting. If you would like to stay for the regular business meeting, we certainly invite you to do so. If you think it's time for dinner hour and you want to make a quick escape, now is a really good time to do that. Again, thank you for being here. Sherry.
Did you give me this?
Mr. Dillon, do we have anyone signed up for a public forum?
We do not.
Okay, thank you. Next up is the facilities report from Dr. Hopkins.
All right, good evening, Ms. Wallace, Dr. Quinn, and board members. Just want to give you a brief update. Not much has changed since the last work session or the last month update regarding the projects that are currently ongoing. About the Bethany project, the home next to it, the abatement is complete, and hopefully we'll start seeing that tractor move this week. They are removing some roof panels this week, so hopefully that will be demolished in the incoming week and ready for groundbreaking.
Which is tomorrow,
Yes.
right?
Well,
Tomorrow? No, Wednesday.
so,
Wednesday.
At least we'll have some ground turned up to make it easier to dig. Kynard, the punch list items on the alarm system are getting worked out, so that should be fully operational with no hiccups here soon. Crowder's Creek, the AC system, the only thing we're waiting on are the CO2 detectors that have to be installed at the base units. Those are on back order, those are coming in, and those should be online very soon once they're delivered. The DRC job, the rails and condensers, which will hold the devices for the air conditioning in the lobby and the E-Hall, are in. The condensers may be installed at this time. We had them on site. Weather was holding it up at the time I wrote this. And the socking, which are the big fabric socks that are the air conduits for the gym, are on site and they'll be installed as well. And when the new units are on, they'll be installed and we'll be good to go out there. Tomorrow afternoon, we have our final OSF meeting, Office of School Facilities meeting for the field house project at the high school. We'll go over the final plans for that, and hopefully that will be taken care of soon, and we'll be ready to move on that once we get the remainder of the site work completed. In terms of the parking lot, I did not put this on here, but those final designs have been completed. So Shellco is doing that project, so we're hoping in January we'll have some movement on the parking lot B, student parking lot. At the 9th grade campus, we had spoken to you earlier where the new exit and entrance is proposed for what will be the third middle school. There's that little corner of the adjacent property. We're making a little headway there, and hopefully before Christmas we'll have some news on that process for you. And Bethel, the 2 roof units will be installed at Christmas break, so we should be wrapping that project up over Christmas. And by the way, I forgot to mention that for Bethany, the new tank for the well system will be installed over Christmas as well. The monument to hold it was poured last Monday, so it's just ready to go as soon as the school closes down. Any questions about any of those projects? I did not put this down, but last week Dr. Quinn and I were able to meet with McMillan, Past, and Smith, so just to let you know, we are kind of revving back up on that side of the project, so that will be included in some updates starting in January for you. Several months ago, Dr. Quinn and I had spoken about the desire to share with you some of the safety protocols that we use in the district and some of the the physical safety processes that we have in place on our campuses. I was able to, at Dr. Quinn's invitation, present to a parent group several weeks ago, and Sheriff Tolson was part of that meeting as well. They saw much of the same presentation you will see tonight, but this has just a little bit more detail in it. But I wanted to give you an overview of our efforts, just because safety is on everybody's mind. We've had a lot of questions about that we've answered, and we wanted to share some of that with you today. All right, our safety process is really founded in partnerships. We don't operate in isolation. We have partnerships not only with the other districts, but with all the agencies and entities that respond to emergencies and that help support folks in emergencies. The Sheriff's Department, FEMA, 911, York County Emergency Management. We work with all of these agencies regularly. For example, not necessarily physical emergency, but weather-related emergencies. We have phone calls with the emergency management system and their meteorologists to make sure that we're responding appropriately to weather issues. So, as I mentioned, we're not in isolation. We share this information and we use our partners to get more information. One thing that we do is we use the incident command system. That's kind of an out there term for you, but the incident command system is a FEMA process that all agencies in all states, all county agencies, state agencies, responding agencies use. It's just a hierarchy, a structure of command. That way everyone is clear on who is in charge during an incident, who has the leverage to make things happen during an incident. And so we follow this same structure, so we're in common language with those agencies as well. We have several schools that are within the 10-mile radius of the Catawba Nuclear Station. And for those schools, we have special protocols that we have to do. Those of you that are within that radius, your annual due calendar that you get also has these protocols in it for you as a private citizen. Some of the things we do every year, all of our staff members at every school have to go through an annual training on how we respond to a nuclear event that may occur at the Catawba station. We learn what the levels of event are, what the responses are, what their duties are in case of such an event. We also have an annual interview with a FEMA official that comes in and they randomly select one school and generally transportation. We did this about 3 weeks ago with Lauren, and the gentleman was from Virginia, as a matter of fact, and it came down and he had a whole litany of questions. He asked us to make sure that we are knowledgeable about what the processes are in case of a nuclear emergency. And that certainly is much bigger than just the school district, but we're an integral part of getting people out of that 10-mile radius should something like that occur. Another partnership we have is with the I Love You Guys Foundation, and this is with what we call the Standard Response Protocol. This is a common language of school alerting words that is shared by every school district in York County, all the police departments, sheriff's department, and all the agencies. You may have seen this in our schools. This is pretty prevalent in almost all of our schools. And what this is the Standard Response Protocol. That way, when we call an emergency situation in a school, shelter, for example, for an earthquake or an evacuate for a fire, a lockdown or a secure, these are titles for procedures that go in place that are shared and known by the police department. So if they hear secure, a building's on secure on our radio system, they will know that there's not an imminent threat. If they hear it's a lockdown, they know that we've got an imminent threat on campus. So what this does is align our language to make sure we're all understanding what's happening in case of an event. This is, as I mentioned, shared between all the school districts and the agencies. We do some extensive emergency planning each year. We have a very extensive emergency plan that we update every year with any changes to our procedures, any changes to personnel, or anything that may happen during the course of the year. For example, we're just implementing our new digital radio system. So we're simultaneously working on updates to our emergency plan that accurately reflect the use of those. We do that annually. Those are verified by third-party agencies. We have eyes on it from our police departments, our sheriff's department, fire department, agencies. And we share those with those local responding agencies so they know what we expect our staff to do in those situations. We go through extensive emergency training each year. We have monthly fire drills, active shooter drills, and lockdown drills. We do those one per semester. Natural disaster drill, one per semester. We usually arrange that with the Tornado Awareness Week and Earthquake Awareness Week. We're developing a cadre of tabletop exercises that schools and even the district level will start going through, just making sure on paper we know who's responsible for what actions in case an event. And we also have annual training, as I mentioned, on the nuclear emergency, making sure that new staff is up to date on the I love you guys language, and with Raptor, which I'll talk more about right now. Raptor is a technology system that you've heard about, and we've had a little bit of growing pains with it, but I will say I had a conversation at Griggs Road today, and they ran their most recent Raptor drill after going through all the protocols that we put in place to make sure everyone's identified, and they had 97% accuracy, and the 4 or 5, I think it was 6 students maybe, that weren't accounted for were actually CDA students that were able to go back in and do, not CDA students, excuse me, students that were for some reason home-based in their school but did not actually attend their school. So we were very excited about that, and they're going to kind of be our model to make sure everybody understands that if the procedures are followed, you can make sure you get everything done right. But what does Raptor do? The primary function of that is to manage our emergency situations, okay? The drills that I mentioned has a drill manager in it, so every school uploads their drills at the beginning of the year, and as they go through drills, I can go to the dashboard and see where any school is on their drill schedule to make sure we're up to date on those. A Raptor alert, if there's an emergency situation, everyone that's within that school or at the district office that is a Raptor administrator is notified immediately of what's going on. Accountability, what it allows for teachers in real time to account for the students that they are responsible for. For example, if they're in a lockdown, they're in a classroom, there's not time to send messages back and forth. They have Raptor, they can account for a student that they have present in their room, and on the dashboard, the principal would see all these students are accounted for. If someone's not accounted for, we can find out where they are. In reunification, which means if we have to leave the site of a school, if there's an event that for some reason the school is unable to be used as a pickup point for parents, we would have to go somewhere else. Raptor also allows us to manage that situation by allowing us to identify students, get them to the front, have a process so that parents can sign off that they have been reunified with their child, and it keeps a rolling record that we can look at a dashboard. So it's a very good tool really for unification and for accountability of students in situations that are serious emergency events. It is also our visitor management tool. So any student and any parent that's visited our schools, when you check in, you're checking into Raptor. And that adds you to the list of folks that are in that building in case of an emergency situation. You would also need to be accounted for. It also tracks visitors. We register with the national and state sex offender registries, and so it cross-checks every visitor with that list to make sure that we've got the right kind of people entering our buildings. And our folks are trained on how to use that and react if that comes up. As you know, we have school resource officers in our secondary schools. And thanks to the board several years ago, we implemented school safety officers in our elementary schools. Those are hired through Defender and contracted through Defender. Our secondary school resource officers are deputy sheriffs from the sheriff's office. I will say there has been some movement. The state is funding SROs for all schools, and this will be a time-consuming effort to fill these spots, according to the sheriff, but we are looking over the next few years to hopefully put SROs in all of our schools, and that will be a combination of York County Sheriff's officers and Clover PD officers. According to the Sheriff's Department I spoke with last week, I think we are looking at the possibility of getting 2 SROs for elementary schools this year. So we'll be spending some time analyzing which schools would be the best best place for those to be.
Dr. Hopkins, it's the same situation we face with not enough teachers. They don't have enough officers. They would give us the officers we needed if they had them. So it's really a manpower, or womanpower.
And it's not just Clover, it's York 1, 2, all the districts in the county. And so they're able to chip away at it, and Sheriff Tolson is confident that over time they'll be able to get it done, but it's going to take a little time to get there. But we're very excited about that prospect. I want to mention a little bit about cybersecurity. Matt was unable to be here tonight, but I did want to talk a little about some of the things that we do in terms of technology that help supplement our safety plan. We are probably the most well-covered district in South Carolina in terms of video surveillance and cameras. We've got over 1,200 security cameras across the district, not only at school sites, not only indoors, but also on the campuses and at district buildings across the campus as well. The number of 84 card access doors is up to 91. Those are the ID card doors, and we're in the process of looking at an alternative software because our software is going out of date. That will upgrade that system a little bit more and allow us a little more accountability in the use of our access doors. I mentioned the visitor check-in system, Raptor, and the reunification system. We also have an AI, and I took notes on this from Matt because I thought I might have questions, so I wanted to make sure I explained these because my computer lingo is not quite up to speed. An AI-driven firewall with advanced intrusion, threat detection, and mitigation. What this means, there is a rule called CIPA, which is Children's Internet Protection Act, that we have to follow those standards that are applied to all government agencies and large corporations that operate a network. So those are the basics that we are required to do through CIPA, but we go a little bit beyond that, and I'll talk some more about that as well. The Cisco AMP for all end users. Think of a virus scan for your computer, except on steroids. This is the highest level of virus scan that we can have on our end user devices. So these are all of our teacher and student devices, iPads, and/or MacBooks. Home and school filtering. Spent some time talking about that at school. Again, we are mandated by CIPA to have certain things blocked, unavailable to view through the school network. We have less control when students go home and they are able to get on their home networks. However, we do exercise some level of filtration in that. That's not required by CIPA, but we do have open DNS filtering, which means that all of our devices are connected to a list of sites that we maintain that are off limits, and keywords that are off limits. Now, that being said, any student that has some chops can probably go to a VPN, which is another network, virtual private network, and bypass those firewalls to get things. So that's why we ask parents to be vigilant at home. But we do everything we can with those devices at school and at home in terms of filtering. We are updating our password policy. We have new cloud-based authentication, which means that our password logins are not solely done on site. They're managed through the cloud, which is a more reliable system. New AI and machine learning driven email filtering. Most email filtering operates from definition, meaning that you define bad emails and it looks for those emails. Ours acts on behavior of emails. So for example, what happens often is we may get an email from Dr. Quinn asking us to buy a gift card. That's someone actively phishing us. So what this does is it looks at patterns in Dr. Quinn's email, and if she's sending emails to people that she doesn't normally send them to, it detects it and alerts our IT system. So it's a little more engagement rather than just going by a defined list. Our security task force, which I'll talk a little bit about in just a minute, we have 3 representatives from IT on that for not only terms of cybersecurity, but device and infrastructure hardware safety as well. We do a lot of things on campus to keep our facility sites secure. Entrances over the past several years. At the end of Dr. Sosny's tenure, we made sure that every school had a double entrance that was secure, and we could prevent people from just walking in. They are controlled by the receptionists in the school. I mentioned the cameras. We've got full alarm systems, not just for fire and burglar alarms, emergency alarms. We've got backup generators, etc. Remote door locks. I mentioned the Knox box. This is a little box that you see on the exterior of every school building. If you ever wonder what that is, the Knox box is so any fire department that's responding, they all have a universal key. They're able to have access to the building in case of a fire when no one's there. Power redundancies. We have generators in our buildings to help with power in a temporary fashion. We do a very good job of our lighting on our campus. So not just around the building, our parking lots, but we're also making sure that those are covered well with cameras as they're lit. Digital radios, I mentioned earlier, in the process right now, I've got 3 more deliveries to make of our new digital upgraded radios, which have more capability than our current radios do for those folks across the district, our administrators and district staff that would need that capability given an emergency situation or some situation where we would need to have radio communications beyond the school itself. All of our classrooms, just remind you, all of our classrooms have IP phones. Teachers have their own voicemail. They're able to make calls and receive calls during the appropriate time. You can't get them during instructional time, but they do have access, so that's something that not every school has. And obviously the suite of Blackboard Connect allows us to text, phone call, and email all parents or any subgroup of parents or school-affiliated folks with any information that we need to share with them. We also do drug dog sweeps at the high school and middle school. We use metal detectors and wands at high school sporting events. If you went to a football game, you've seen them, and if you go to a basketball game, we have them at the basketball game. If there are larger events that need them, we will certainly supply those. Classroom lockdown kits in the event that we were ever in a lockdown in a school, oftentimes those last many hours, okay? Because if something requires a school to lock down, it's very likely that that site will become a crime scene. It will be locked down by the police. And the students and staff may literally spend hours within that classroom until the police come and release them. So we supply every class with a lockdown kit, which supplies a semi-private restroom area. If there's an emergency needed, the teachers can also put water in there. It's got all the stuff that you would need in an emergency situation. So every classroom has that. It's a 5-gallon bucket that sits in the corner the teacher has access to. And schools are also supplied, we supply them each year with emergency bags, which has anything that you might need if you have to carry students off-site, bullhorn. We've got backups for the school site maps, backups of the emergency plan, hand rosters in case we have a technology issue. All of that stuff is in this emergency bag and ready to go at any time. So we feel very confident that we could respond. Another big issue that has come certainly to the forefront over the past several years is mental health support. We've had some questions in the past. We've always provided mental health support to our students and families through Catawba Mental Health, which is our state agency in Rock Hill. We do contract with them for 6 mental health counselors, which are in our buildings. We provide space for them. We also have an MOU with Thrive, which is our local provider for mental health, and we provide space for them when needed for our students. I'm excited, and we'll probably share some more about this at a later date, but we have just started another partnership with a company called Care Solace. One of the issues with finding mental health is the process of getting an appointment, finding a provider. I'll give you an example. Thrive, our local partner, is on a 3-month waiting list right now for any new patients. So what Care Solace does, it's a national organization that's in several districts in our state. We can refer a family if they wish, or they can self-refer themselves to Care Solace, and they will basically hold that family's hand through the process of navigating insurance, navigating finding providers, setting up appointments, and following up. It takes that out of the hands of the school and out of the hands of the parent and provides the ability of someone to help walk them through that very rough and long process of finding that care, especially when it's as difficult to find as it is now. We've gone through some training recently with the administrative staff. Our psychologists are going through it. Next up will be our social workers and our counselors. They are really excited about this. It is also available to our staff. Okay, Okay, so it's another layer of support that we have for our staff along with what we already have in place through human resources. We just recently completed, we've got our next one this Friday. We had 48 staff across the district go through threat assessment training. What that means is if there's ever an event, if a student makes a threat against someone else or against themselves, or does something out of line, we have a team that can assess what their needs might be. If it's a serious event, if it's something that we need to refer on to potentially mental health or back to the counselor, whatever the case may be. So each team is now trained to identify the level of threat that a student may present in such a situation. Suicide prevention, you would be amazed at how important this is for schools. At the elementary level, we've had multiple suicide ideations this year. And so suicide prevention training, we have protocols for that. We're going to have some updates and some supplementary training scheduled in January for our counselors and social workers. And we also we will be going through our response now that we've had the threat assessment training for example, a suicide ideation. What would our response be if they scored high enough that it required some sort of follow-up? So all that's in policy or in practice. So we're really working on this. This is not an easy task, but putting together the resources is the biggest part of providing solid mental health, because we are not mental health providers. Our counselors are not mental health counselors. Our counselors are school counselors. We do not take that on. That is for professionals, and this helps people get in contact with the professionals they need for their help. Last and not least, you heard me mention a couple of times our safety task force. We schedule to meet bi-weekly. Every now and then we do not meet if there's nothing new, but this task force is a diverse team that includes district administrators, school administrators, our maintenance director, 3 members of IT, as I mentioned, our transportation coordinator. We have our lead psychologist when we have special needs issues. For example, when we're updating our emergency plan. In schools, emergency plans, we have to have updates on making sure that if a child has special needs, that we're able to account and help them out of that situation. We have some community members. We have a parent who is a trained firefighter. That is part of our system. We have one of our teachers who is also a trained trainer in all things fire and enforcement. So we've got some very wonderful people that are part of our emergency task force that really do a lot of work making sure that we're following through on the trainings, the drilling, etc. Lastly, I do want to mention that right before COVID, we went through an audit. The York County Sheriff's Department audited our plan and all of our facilities. And we are talking with SLED right now. Mr. Hunter, as a matter of fact, has a contact at SLED, and we're trying to work out the details to hopefully get a spring audit from SLED, South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, to come up and just give another outside look from an agency outside of the county, just to make sure that we're on top of our P's and Q's. I will say that I'm confident that we've got a very good plan and we do a lot. Our goal over the next year and a half, finishing this year and certainly going into next year, is to make sure that everyone is not only aware of all of these, but the right people are fully trained and understand what their roles will be and how to use these resources. All right, I know that was a lot at once, but I wanted to give you a big overview. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, you can let Dr. Quinn know, and I'll be happy to answer them otherwise. Okay.
I have one. Were there any findings from the previous audit? And if so, what were the corrective actions for the findings?
Those were before or right at the same time that we were doing our secure entrances. Okay, we just completed that. The biggest items that came up were things like campus lighting. By and large, it's been a few years, Mr. Meek, so please forgive me for not remembering everything. It's been a few years, but the Sheriff's Department was very positive about the efforts that we had at Clover. You know, we're far ahead of some other places in terms of the technology access. We have cameras, et cetera, the door systems. Other schools are probably up with us now, but there wasn't anything major. It was really diligence and making sure we follow through and the appropriate training and that understanding is the biggest part.
Yeah, I seem to recall indoor locks, so making sure classroom doors are locked.
That's right.
That was a
Okay.
big one. That was inconsistent in some buildings. Not all, but some.
All right, well, thank you all very much, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Next up is our monthly finance report. Mr. Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Dr. Quinn, members of the board. We have our monthly finance report where we are giving the information regarding the interest and income through November 30th and expenses through November 30th. You'll notice we've taken in $18.6 million and we've paid out $36.7 million through November 30th. The information related to bonds outstanding stays the same. We pay principal and interest twice a year. Principal is paid in March, so this won't change until March, and interest is paid in August and March. So you can see this will stay here so you can get an idea of where we stand at any point in time in any month. And we have the standard monthly budget report that is coming out of our general ledger. This too is put in the board packet and is on the board docs so people can look at it. It's too small to read here, but we've summarized the total revenue and total expenditures on the previous slide. There's one thing I'd like to talk about before we get to the audit, and the audit is the primary part of my presentation tonight of my report. That has to do with substitutes and substitute salaries. If you'll see on the agenda, we have an information related to substitute. Our reason for bringing this up is we're having a challenge finding enough qualified substitute teachers to be in classrooms on a regular basis, much like we have the chain challenge of other service folks that are employed. We have made some statistics and some discussions with the company that provides our substitutes and have come to the conclusion that part of this is based upon the salary that we pay. We have a tiered schedule of salary basis for substitute, starting at $85 a day for a non-certified type substitute, moving up to $100 a day for a person who has a certificate, and then for a person who is in a long-term sub basis. That means they'll be there for 6 weeks or 8 weeks for a teacher being out for a long-term thing. We pay the actual substitute salary
Teacher
that they
salary.
would be making if they were earning
Teacher salary.
on a full-time basis. Now that sets us apart from other districts, because most districts don't pay that much for the long-term subs. But we feel it's worthwhile to be there because it gives us the opportunity to select good, well-trained teachers, and it's important to have a good, well-trained teacher in every classroom. Now what we're coming to is we believe, based upon what Jessica has told us, that they're having some substitutes who would take our call in the morning. Then they would find out that there would be a call from another neighboring school district who pays slightly more than we do. And they would drop our call and then go to work with the other neighboring school district. In an effort to combat that, we're going to consider raising our basic daily rate for the substitutes to $100 a day for every regular daily substitute, regardless of their certification prior to coming to work for us or whether they don't have a certification. We think we can pay for that out of the regular school budget for substitutes. This year we have $1.6 million budgeted for substitutes. And thus far we have only spent about $600,000 through the end of November. I have made some calculations and make some estimates, and they're just as good as the calculation and the estimate and the math, and believe that we can probably end up this year, if the utilization of substitutes in the last half of the year is similar to the first half of the year, we will probably spend on today's calculation just over $1.2 million. That would leave us some money in the substitute budget that we would not expect to spend that would allow us to raise that daily rate and provide the opportunity to have some more substitutes in our staff. And I think it's important to maintain that calculation in order to have a regular, normal substitute qualified teacher in the classroom for students. Of course, I have to qualify that if we have a long-term, real rapid flu season, those numbers would naturally change, and what I just told you would not be correct. But if things stay the same and at a reasonable basis, we should end up within the budget by the time the year ends. So this is not asking for a motion, it's just giving you some information that is within our regular budgeted amount that we feel that we can, the administration feels we can go ahead and make that change at the first of the year. So Dr. Quinn might add.
Now, I would just
comment.
say that you've heard in public forum, some TAs who have come forward earlier this year are already having to cover even beginning in the first couple of weeks of school. Our teachers have to cover for other teachers at the middle and high school level because there's not a lot of TAs there. It's putting a lot of stress on our staff not to have a substitute pool. And even when we know we've got the pool there and they're choosing other districts rather than coming to us for, because they pay $15 more a day, that means a lot to some people, and I think we need to be competitive. If I thought this would break the budget, we would bring this for an action item to vote, but we think we can live within our budget and still do this. But I would ask if you had any questions or concerns about us making this move.
Where are we compared to other districts if we go to the $100 a day, like with neighboring school districts?
That puts us on par.
So they're very, like York and Fort Miller, similar?
Fort Mill and Rock Hill are at $100 a day. I think York is still at 85. We are still at 85. As soon as we move, they'll probably move as well. It's always a competition with the four of us, but we're losing out to Fort Mill and Rock Hill because of that pay difference.
So there'll be no difference in certified versus uncertified at that point?
We still will maintain the certified at their standard daily rate if they had not retired and come back. Yeah.
And
Well-
he's talking for long-term subs there. So
Gotcha.
we
For
pay,
long-term subs.
yeah, for if you are going out for a maternity leave, when we put a teacher in the classroom, we pay them their daily rate as if they were a full-time teacher. The other districts have a fee somewhere around like $150 a day. They don't do what we do, so that is our advantage, and that's why we're able to get our teachers to come back and do maternity leaves or medical leaves. But this $100 would put certified, formally certified teachers and non-certified teachers making the same thing for just a typical daily sub.
And that's what everybody else is doing.
That's what
too, right?
everybody else is
They're
doing too.
Okay.
They don't differentiate. Some of our best subs aren't certified. They're very good and very faithful, so we want to keep them.
Any other questions? The main part of my report tonight is the audit presentation. We have a partner from the audit firm, Ken Meadows, is here to make that presentation. I previously passed out a letter from them to you, which basically summarizes some of the things he's going to say. This too is on the board docs, and I'm going to give another one that to you that he brought as paper part of the financial presentation and the PowerPoint that he's going to share with you. So, Mr. Ken Meadows, I'll bring this all around in just a minute.
As Ken said, I'm Ken Meadows. I'm a partner with Green Finney Colley. It's my pleasure to serve as the audit partner this year. This is my first year on the audit. David Phillips had been the partner on it for several years. We kind of looked at the scheduling the past year and tried to balance the workload, and I volunteered to take over because in our firm, y'all got an excellent reputation. Ken and Amy doing a great job. You know, people love working on this audit, and so I jumped at the chance to become the audit partner. We've just promoted another audit partner effective January 1st, so if I have rebalancing again, and David has indicated that he's going to take Clover back. So this might be the only chance I get here, but I will say that, you know, your reputation is deserved based on everything that I've seen. Ken and Amy do an excellent job. We do a number of school districts throughout the state, and I'd say they're better than almost all of them. So as far as finances, so as far as getting us in and everything. So anyway, I'll run through a PowerPoint presentation, just kind of touching on, first of all, the opinion, then discussing the general fund and some of the other funds, and then hit on the assets and liabilities, and then finally on the compliance part of our audit. So if y'all got any questions, feel free to ask as I'm going through or at the end. Or as y'all look forward throughout the year or later on, please ask away then as well. So the first thing you get to is the opinion in the financial statements. That kind of outlines who's responsible for what. So the district is responsible for the financial statements. They're responsible for the underlying accounting systems and the internal controls. Our responsibility is to give reasonable assurance that the financial statements are materially correct. So it's not absolute assurance, there's reasonable assurance, and then there's the concept of materiality. So we don't look at every transaction. We may look at a sampling of transactions. We may perform analytical procedures and stuff like that. So, and we may look, but don't look at everything, because if it's clearly immaterial, we don't look at that. And then it's not a forensic audit. A lot of people hear of an audit, think you're doing a forensic audit to find fraud. That's not the purpose. Our purpose is to give an opinion on the financial statements. And our opinion is an unmodified opinion. That's the best one you can get, so there are no modifications necessary. That's the one you usually get. So that's the opinion. The next few slides kind of cover the general fund, give you an overview of the general fund. You'll see the general fund had a fund balance of $27.8 million at June 30th, all of which was unassigned. And to kind of put that into perspective, that's about 29% of actual expenditures and about 25% of budgeted expenditures for the next fiscal year. Your goal is 25%, so you're right at the goal. The GFOA recommends a minimum of 2 months, 16.7%, so your goal is a little bit above that, roughly 3 months, which I think is prudent as well. So as Ken kind of showed when he was going through his monthly things, you know, it's important to have a fund balance at June 30th, because you've got 6 more months of operations that you have to fund. I think the number that y'all funded, if I recall correctly, is about 18 million or so. So a big chunk of this fund balance gets used up over the next 6 months before property taxes start coming back in and everything. So that's the main reason to have an adequate fund balance. And then you've also got any emergencies that may arise. You may have, or just mismatches of revenues and expenditures. And then also you may plan future spending and stuff, so you may accumulate fund balance for planned future expenses. So that's a real brief overview of the fund balance. Looking at revenues, revenues were about $105 million, I'm sorry. You'll see most of that is property taxes, $58 million from property taxes, about $47 million from the state. So those are your 2 primary funding sources. Compared to last year, revenues are up 7.8%, or about 8% higher. That was $4.5 million of that was due to increased property taxes driven by increased millage and values. The state revenues also increased about $3.7 million this past year. Compared to budget, revenues came in higher than budget by about $7.9 million. Once again, revenues for property taxes were higher than budgeted, and as were state revenues. And I'll just note, just looking forward as you're going into the budget cycle for fiscal year 24, you'll notice that the general fund revenues will likely increase a fair amount, just due to the way the state is funding school districts. They're changing their funding model from a per pupil model to more of a teacher-student ratio allocation. So some of the funds that normally would have flowed through special revenue funds will probably make their way into the general fund. So I'll just make a note of that so that when you enter into the budgeting process and the revenues jump up, that's the reason why.
It's not necessarily, though, that we're going to have a windfall of money. They just moved it from one fund to the other.
Correct, yes, just moving from a special revenue fund over to the general fund.
Right.
So, looking at general fund expenditures this past year, general fund expenditures were about $95 million. Most of that was in instruction, as you would expect, and then support services. And then about $400,000 in other expenditures, including capital expenditures funded through the general fund. That's an increase, overall expenditures increased $4.2 million, or about 5% from the prior year. Most of that is due to higher salaries and benefits. You'll see the higher salaries were driven really by cost of living adjustments, bonuses that were paid out, and then 22 new positions that were added this past fiscal year. Compared to budget, expenditures came in $1.7 million under budget, primarily due to conservative budgeting practices, and then also purchase services and supplies came in lower than budgeted. You also had some other financing uses this past year of about $7 million. You transferred $7 million out of the general fund. $6.5 million of that went to the capital projects fund for future capital projects. And then $500,000 went to special revenue funds, mainly to fund student activities or pupil activities. So that's a quick overview of the general fund. Next, we'll look at some of the other funds that the district has. The debt service fund at June 30th had a fund balance of $3.4 million. And that was about 38% of your debt service requirements for the fiscal year 2023. So that's got a decent fund balance in it at June 30th. The capital projects fund has a real healthy fund balance of about $49 million at June 30th. If you look at $2.7 million of that is unspent impact fees. That just started last fiscal year, so this was the first full year, I think, of that fiscal year. And then $46 million of that has been transferred in from the general fund over the years and remains unspent. So, so it's a good fund balance, but almost all of that fund balance will be used to fund several projects over the next 2 or 3 years, including about $1.7 million in outstanding commitments at year end. So y'all have plans for all that, although y'all haven't formally committed to those as of June 30th. So
We've committed verbally, we haven't written the checks. These would be your Clover High School, your Bethany, your FF&E for the new high school, all of those things that y'all all know about extensively.
Exactly. The special revenue funds basically are used to account for your grant funds from the federal government, state governments, and local sources. You had about $1.6 million of fund balance at year end. Most of that, about $950,000 of that related to student activities. And then you had about $400,000 related to Medicaid, and then about $200,000 related to adult education. So those are the fund balances that you had. You also, special revenue funds, you can also carry those over to the next year. So at year end, you had about $2.1 million that you carried over until fiscal year 2023. And then food services, also a special revenue fund, that had a fund balance at year end of $2 million and an increase of about $1.5 million from the prior year. So the food service fund had a very good year this year. And that's pretty much across all districts that we've done. Their food service funds have really, with the number of students that were taking advantage of the free lunches and stuff like that and came through, it really increased student counts or meals served and really helped the bottom line for the food service.
I have a quick question for you.
Yeah.
The 2.7 in unspent impact fees, even though we don't actually have it, it shows on, I mean, that's the county's today.
Yes. Yeah, it's still earmarked for y'all.
Okay,
so-
all right.
So it's still included in that fund balance. But
Gotcha.
yes, y'all don't actually have the cash here, the county
Right.
keeps that, so. So that's a quick overview of the funds. Next, we'll look at the statement of net position. And you'll look there if your your total assets are about $285 million. Most of that is in capital assets, about $186 million as you would expect. But you also had cash and investments of $94 million at June 30th. Offsetting those are liabilities of about $306 million. Accounts payable and accrued expenses were about $11 million of that. Then you had your unearned revenues of about $2 million related to the special revenue funds. And then long-term obligations, mainly debt that you've got outstanding of $91 million. And then you've got your allocations for the state pension plan and the allocations for the OPEB plan, the retiree health plan for the state. And those aren't true liabilities. If you look at, those aren't liabilities that the school district's going to have to fund. No one can come to you and say you've got to pay these things. What they really are allocations based on your participation in the state's plan. The state has a huge unfunded position in their pension plan and their OPEB plan. I mean, they owe billions of dollars, or they have billions of dollars of unfunded liabilities, basically. So, from an accounting standpoint, they say that you've got to allocate that unfunded position out to all the various employers and have them show it on their government-wide statements. But no one should be alarmed that, hey, Clover's going to have to come up with basically $200 million to pay these liabilities. What happens is that to participate in these plans, you have to pay so much, and they've been ratcheting up the pension plan every year to about 1%. It just reached for fiscal year 23 the maximum amount that they can go without redoing the legislation. So, and that's, I can't remember, it's approximately 20%. It may be a little bit more than that. It may be a little bit less. I can't recall. But the employee pays a fair amount into that as well, about 9% and stuff like that. So that's where you see it, is that the employee and the employer have to pay more to fund this deficit in these plans. Unfortunately, this is about the first year that the pension liability has gone down because the market did fairly well last year. Unfortunately, it's done poorly this year, and so I expect that next year when we come in, that pension liability will go up. And the OPEB thing continues to go up. That's retiree health, and health costs continue to go up, and that's even more dramatically underfunded at the state level. So those aren't, I mean, those still show in your statement of net position, but you can argue whether they're true liabilities or not, or whether they should be on there or not. But because they do, your net position was a negative $21 million roughly. If you take those out, you're positive to the tune of about $180 million. So that's the statement of net position. Looking at just some other balance sheet items, capital assets were about $186 million. That's your buildings that the school district has, and vehicles. That's a decrease of about $3 million, as depreciation was about $5.9 million, and that exceeded your additions this year of about $2.9 million. Your long-term obligations, as I mentioned, were $91.2 million. That's a decrease of about $5.9 million from the prior year, as y'all made principal payments on your debt of $4.9 million, and then the premium on your bonds amortized off to about $1 million. And then next year, you've got debt service payments due of about $8.8 million for fiscal year 23. So. We've got, just to let you know, there's an accounting update that goes into effect next year, basically dealing with cloud services or software that's on the cloud and everything like that. I won't get into a whole lot of detail other than to say that basically this new accounting pronouncement will have you put an asset on the books, a right to use asset, and then liability for any amount that you owe. So we'll work with Ken, we'll work with Amy to identify those software things, that commitments that you have, and then determine whether it's material or not, and then put that on the books. This past year, just to let you know, there was a similar thing for leases that we looked at, determined it wasn't material. We may revisit that again next year in conjunction with this, and in conjunction with this, it may become material. So we may put an asset on the books for the leases and the software, and then a liability as well. So that's a quick summary of the financial statements. On a compliance standpoint, we looked at we did a single audit, which is an audit of your federal funds. We looked at the ESSER funds, which are your COVID-19 monies, stimulus monies that you received. You received a lot of monies, as did all districts. And then we also looked at Title I. We rotate that one in every 2 or 3 years. We look at Title I, we look at USDA and IDA. This year it happened to be Title I. And both of those programs looked good. There were no findings, no material weaknesses, no significant deficiencies. Everything looked good for that. So we found y'all were in compliance with that. Y'all did a good job there. From an internal control standpoint, we do have a management letter comment that we typically put in there. In the management letter, if you read the management governance letter that you've got there, dealing with people activity or student funds, that's basically just because you've only got a bookkeeper out at the schools. From a cost benefit standpoint, it doesn't make sense to have more people involved in the accounting at the schools, but because it's just one person, there's an inherent lack of segregation of duties. So we just want to alert y'all to that, basically, because it is a risk area. But that's what the comment is if you read that. So just in summary, you got the GFOA and the ASBO certificates of excellence again this year. I'm not sure how many years y'all received those, but 10. Okay, yeah, so 10 years. So that's very good. And y'all are in healthy financial condition as of June 30th. And the audit went well. And I wouldn't mind being back here next year. I am, but we'll see if David supersedes.
Thank you, Ken. Any questions? I know there's been a lot of technical information tonight. We do this once a year, but when he comes in to present this to me before the board, it's always a happy meeting. I'm always really impressed with your work, so thank you very much for what you do, and certainly very impressed with Ken, Amy, George, and that group on the back hall, that small, mighty group that keeps our finances going. So thank you all very much for a job well done.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Now, superintendent's report.
All right, the superintendent's report is short because we had several other lengthy reports tonight. We're going to start out with our calendar. Board, we will be bringing you tonight for second reading a recommendation on the calendar. We also, because you asked us to go back and make sure we do a much more thorough job to make sure all of our staff sees the calendar and weighs in, we did that work, and so Brian's going to present some new numbers for you today, and then we'll make a recommendation for one of the calendars. We will need a vote for approval tonight on the calendar. So go ahead.
Thank you, Dr. Quinn. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm here to present second reading of the calendar. First, I'm going to give you some updated figures from our survey that we shared with both parents and staff. In total, we had 3,538 respondents. 2,481 of those were parents. We did get an increase in our staff reporting with 697 teachers, 315 total staff members, and 45 administrators. That is an increase of 770 total submissions since first reading, so about the past two weeks. So we've had an increase. Where we are still at is draft B is the favorite, and that is why that is going to be our recommendation this evening to you, the board, is draft B. You can see that the overall weighted score, 8,618, is far and away above. It garnered nearly 50% of the total first place votes combined. I did break that down to parents and staff for you, and you can see in both cases that B was the overwhelming favorite. B was about just under 50% of total for parents and it was over 50% of the total vote, first place vote for staff.
But if it wasn't first, it was generally second. So
Yes, and
that's
that
why
is
the weighted vote
that is the
heavy.
clear information you see there. Draft B, only 166 total third place votes, so it was clearly one or two. The intercession feedback was one of those things that we wanted to get more information on. You can see that 78% either strongly supported or somewhat supported the intercessions. That is broken down along that top line. Left is parents, 76% fell into that, strongly agree or somewhat agree, and 83% of staff were in that section. There were 11% that were neutral and 11% that disagreed with the intercessions. The feedback that we got remained very similar upon the different options, that it disrupts student learning. These were respondents that said they strongly disagreed or somewhat disagreed. So these are the folks that got that, and this was their feedback on why they disagreed. That it either disrupts student learning, child care availability, not familiar with it, or other. And if they selected other, they added their additional comments. And the additional feedback that we got from the folks that disagreed with it were all still along the same lines of the responses that we had gotten over the first period of that survey feedback. It requires the early start, not enough notice, the summer is too short, they preferred the time during the summer, and it disrupts work schedule for parents. So those were your main points of feedback. They didn't always all say it exactly like that, but those were the themes. The early release feedback was a little less supportive, but still strong support. 71% total. 65% of parents were either somewhat or strongly agreed with the idea, and 85% of staff. And then you see 17% neutral and 12% disagreed. The 15% either strongly or somewhat disagreed on the parent side, and only 5% of staff. Again, very similar percentages to what we had with the disrupts learning and child care availability. And then same with the additional comments with other. No new information on additional comments. They were all still very similar, just a little bit differently worded.
If you don't mind if I interrupt here, I did have a meeting with principals prior or after the board meeting when you expressed some concern of child care during the early release days. And remember that the early release days are 2 hours early, 2 hours early. And the principals all assured me that they would have child care available in their school. We're going to have to do that for our staff children anyway. So we would have child care available for any parent who could not accommodate the early release. Our buses will run and take children home, but if a parent needed the child to stay at school until the regular hours, we will be happy to house the students who need to do that. So they just felt very strongly that the early release was important to our staff. It was the number one thing our teachers asked for, was time to get to make parent phone calls, to have conferences, and to get some work done in their classroom. And so we want to make that happen if we can.
Yeah. And along the same lines of time, that drove some of the changes in the PD versus the work days. In this calendar, there's 6 PD or 6 work days and only 4 PD days instead of a 5 and 5 split. The requirement by the state is 3 professional development days, so we went down on one of those in order to hit that time thing that the staff has shared with us throughout the last couple of years. With that, are there any questions? Everybody received a copy of the most up-to-date. There were no changes since we made a minor tweak prior to first reading. So this is the same calendar that you've had for last couple meetings now. Any
Mr. Chair,
questions?
we would recommend.
Any questions from the board? So without objection, the board will approve calendar draft B for the 2023-2024 academic school year. Hearing none, calendar draft B is approved.
Good. there is a happy
you,
cheer
Mr. Chair.
going somewhere in our district right now from our staff. So thank you very much, board. And just so you've had a lot of fun with this calendar, we're going to bring you 24, 25, sorry, I knew I was saying that wrong, beginning in January. We're going to go ahead and bring that so that we don't have any conflicts with families year out from now. So thank you very much. The last thing on the agenda is Dr. Hemingway, always fun with policies. We have 2 for second reading, so I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening, Dr. Quinn, Mr. Chairman, and members of the board. Tonight we have for second reading 2 policies that we discussed last time. For first reading, our food service policy, as well as our student fees, fines, and changes. There were no significant revisions to this policy. It still covers in our food service the variety of payments that we discuss, a maximum charge amount, alternate meals, the notices that we will give to parents, and also what we would do with in the response to negative balances. And for our students' fees, fines, and charges, we talked about the approval of those fees, what we would do in the case of students who receive free and reduced lunch, also if there was lost and damaged equipment, as well as the unpaid meal balances, which referred us back to our policy for food service. And so when we look at that, the key changes here, the fees were approved by the board. And then there were no fees for students eligible for free lunch, and then we reduced the fees for those students who were eligible for reduced lunch. And then there's no student exempt from any damages to equipment. We felt like if they damaged equipment, regardless of their lunch status, they should still incur those fees. And then students will be charged for unpaid meal balances that refer them back to the policy EFR. Are there any questions about the 2 policies that we discussed? Okay. If there are no questions, then we would like to have a vote.
Yep. Without objection, the board will approve policy EF-R and policy JQ. Hearing none, EFR and JQ are approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And that concludes the superintendent's report. And almost concludes this school year, this calendar year. And so I will say this, there's lots of fun things going on in our schools these next couple of days. If you can get a chance to get out and see and read a Christmas story to a child, or just see what's going on, it's a good time to do it. And really excited to close this calendar year down.
With that being said, was there a motion to end the business meeting?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.